Hello, my name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my own family tried to erase me. My sister planned the most extravagant birthday party you could imagine. Glitz, luxury, all on my parents' dime. But right before the big day, they dropped a bombshell that changed everything. You see, this wasn't just about a party. It was about power, control, a game I didn't even realize I was a pawn in. My parents had been carefully shaping Isolde's future, using her as their golden child, while cutting me out entirely. I was just a placeholder, disposable the moment she was ready to take my place. And that party? It was more than just a celebration. It was a declaration. A final move in a scheme that had been building for years. I wasn't supposed to find out. I wasn't supposed to fight back. But I did. Because this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about reclaiming everything they tried to steal from me. The Delacroix estate was nothing short of magnificent. A sprawling mansion in the heart of New York, surrounded by manicured gardens and towering iron gates that screamed exclusivity. Every detail of the estate was carefully curated to uphold the illusion of perfection, just like the family that lived inside it. I arrived at the grand hall, where tonight's gathering was in full swing. The air buzzed with laughter, the clinking of expensive glassware, and the low hum of classical music playing from the grand piano in the corner. Everything was orchestrated to perfection, down to the smiles on my parents' faces. Althea Delacroix, my mother, floated through the room with the grace of a queen, greeting guests as if she owned the world. Victor, my father, stood at her side, his voice booming with authority, shaking hands with business partners and influential figures. And then there was Isolde, my younger sister, smiling as she entertained a small group of guests, her beauty and charm making her the perfect Delacroix daughter. I sipped my champagne, watching the scene unfold. To an outsider, our family was untouchable, powerful, elegant, the epitome of high society. But I knew better. I had always known. Even standing in the middle of the celebration, I felt like an outsider. The eldest daughter, the one who never quite fit into their carefully crafted mold. Unlike Isolde, I wasn't meant for display. I was tolerated, acknowledged when necessary, but never celebrated. A sudden hush caught my attention. Across the room, my mother leaned in toward my father, her voice lowered just enough to go unnoticed by the guests. But I was watching her closely. I saw the way her fingers tightened around the stem of her wineglass, the way Victor nodded stiffly at whatever she was saying. I took a step closer, pretending to adjust the bracelet on my wrist, my ears straining to catch their words. "We just need to make sure Isolde doesn't find out. At least not yet." My breath hitched. Find out what? Hours later, I wandered the dimly lit halls of the mansion, my heels clicking softly against the marble floors. The party had begun to wind down, the sounds of conversation fading into the distance. I wasn't ready to leave yet, not with those words still ringing in my ears. A low murmur from the study caught my attention. The heavy wooden door was slightly ajar, candlelight flickering from within. I hesitated for only a moment before stepping closer, careful to remain unseen. Inside, my parents sat across from each other, their expressions no longer warm and composed. Victor's voice was edged with frustration. "We're running out of time. The creditors are circling. If we don't secure more funds, everything we've built will be gone." Althea sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. "That's why we have Isolde. She's our safety net." I stiffened. Victor leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "She doesn't know it yet, but she will do what's necessary. She has to." A sharp wave of anger and confusion crashed over me. My sister, our family's safety net? What did that even mean? I wanted to barge in, to demand answers, but my body remained frozen at the threshold. They spoke about Isolde like she was a pawn in a game, something to be used rather than someone to be protected. A sudden vibration in the room interrupted their conversation. Victor pulled out his phone, his expression darkening as he answered. "I told you not to call me at this hour," he hissed. My heart pounded. Whoever was on the other end of that line was important enough to make my father drop his usual composed act. I pressed myself against the wall, listening intently. Yes, I understand. No, she doesn't know yet. I'll handle it. I barely breathed as I heard his footsteps approaching the door. I hurried away before he could see me, my mind racing with unanswered questions. Back at my apartment, I curled up on the couch, my phone resting in my lap. I had spent years keeping my distance from my family, choosing independence over their games of power and deception. But tonight had unsettled me. Something was happening, something bigger than I had realized. I absent-mindedly scrolled through my phone, my fingers tapping on a news notification that had just popped up. My blood ran cold as I read the headline. Exclusive. Delacroix Enterprises facing allegations of financial misconduct. The article detailed suspicious loans, shell companies, and a looming financial crisis that could bring the entire empire crashing down. I sat up, my pulse hammering. This was it. This was why they needed Isolde. My parents weren't just trying to protect the family name, they were using her as a lifeline. My fingers trembled as I dialed Isolde's number. It rang, and rang. She didn't pick up. I exhaled sharply, gripping my phone tighter. She had no idea what was coming. I dialed again, pressing the phone tightly against my ear. Pick up the phone, Izzy. You need to hear this. No answer. Frustration curled in my chest as I tossed my phone onto the coffee table. My pulse pounded, my thoughts racing. Isolde had always been the one they coddled, the one they shielded from anything unpleasant. But if she didn't hear this from me, she was going to find out the hard way. I grabbed my coat and rushed out the door. The cafe was a picture of luxury, dim lighting, marble floors, a quiet hum of conversation between high society patrons. It was exactly the kind of place my parents loved, where they could play their roles as New York's most sophisticated couple. And there she was. Isolde sat at the corner table, looking radiant as ever, her golden hair cascading in soft curls over her designer dress. Across from her, Victor and Althea sat with their usual poised expressions, a polished mask of warmth and authority. A small leather folder lay open between them. I moved closer, my heels clicking against the floor. Isolde was holding a pen, her delicate fingers hovering over the document inside. Althea's voice was smooth, coaxing. This isn't just about business, sweetheart. It's about securing your future. Victor nodded, his tone reassuring. Raphael is a good man. He understands our world. He'll take care of you. I clenched my fists. My stomach twisted. A marriage contract. This wasn't about love. This was a transaction. I watched as Isolde hesitated, chewing her lip, doubt flickering in her expression. If this is really what's best for me, then why do I feel so uneasy? She murmured. A waiter stepped forward, placing a sleek silver pen beside her. I had seen enough. Izzy! Don't sign that paper! The cafe fell silent. Heads turned. Isolde startled, her eyes widening as she looked up at me. Victor and Althea's smiles froze, their perfect facade cracking ever so slightly. Sarah? Isolde's voice was filled with confusion. I stormed to the table, grabbing the document and scanning the fine print. There it was, buried beneath layers of legal jargon, the clause binding her to Raphael, a man she barely knew, under terms that benefited only my parents. I slapped the papers onto the table. What the hell is this? Althea sighed, shaking her head in disapproval. Darling, must you always be so dramatic? Dramatic? My voice shook. You're selling her off like some kind of investment deal, and I'm the dramatic one? Isolde looked between us, her face flushed with embarrassment. Syrah, stop! No, you need to listen to me. This is a setup. They don't care about your happiness, Izzy. They care about their empire. Victor's expression darkened. That's enough. But I wasn't stopping. Not this time. You have no idea what you're signing, I pleaded, turning back to Isolde. They're in trouble, financially, and they're using you to fix it. Isolde's face paled. That's not true. Victor leaned back, voice calm but edged with warning. You don't know what you're talking about. I stared him down. Oh, but I do. I saw the news, Dad. The leaked reports. The money you've been moving around. Your house of cards is about to collapse, and you're dragging Isolde into it. Isolde blinked rapidly, as if trying to process too much at once. But then she straightened, her lips pressing together. Sierra, she said slowly, her tone shifting. I appreciate your concern, but this is my life. My choice. My breath hitched. Althea reached for Isolde's hand, squeezing it gently. See, sweetheart? Your sister never could stand to see you shine. I felt the air punch out of my lungs. That's not... You always think you know better, Isolde snapped, her voice sharp now. But you don't. Maybe I do want this. Maybe this is what's best for me. I took a step back. For the first time, I saw it. How deep their influence ran. How much they had convinced her that I was the problem. I swallowed hard. My throat burned. One day, you'll see the truth, Izzy, I whispered. And when you do, I just hope it's not too late. I turned and walked away. Behind me, Victor's voice was smooth, reassuring. Ignore her, sweetheart. She's always been dramatic. That night, I sat on my couch, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to call Isolde again, to keep trying, to make her see. But another part of me knew it was useless. I thought about our childhood, the way our parents had always placed her on a pedestal while I was left to figure things out alone. I had spent years resenting it, but now I saw the real damage. They had molded her into exactly what they needed. Somewhere across the city, Isolde was probably still with them, still hearing their voices, drowning in their influence. She wasn't ready to see the truth. But when she finally did, I just hoped she wouldn't be too far gone. I exhaled and picked up my phone again, typed a message. Izzy, if you ever need me, I'm here. I stared at the screen. Then I deleted it. Maybe she was right. Maybe she was making the right decision. Maybe everything would be okay. I scrolled through my social media feed absent-mindedly, still processing the disaster of my conversation with Isolde. My sister had chosen them, chosen to believe their lies, and there was nothing I could do about it. Then my breath caught. What the hell? My name was trending. A deep, sickening dread settled in my stomach as I clicked on the first article. My pulse pounded in my ears as the headline filled my screen. Sierra de la Croix, the ungrateful heiress who turned her back on family. I read in stunned silence. The article was vicious, a carefully crafted narrative, painting me as a selfish, disloyal daughter who had abandoned her loving parents. It accused me of biting the hand that fed me, of using my family's name to build my success, only to discard them when I no longer needed them. Lies, all of it. The worst part? People were believing it. The comment section was flooded with sympathy for my parents. Strangers lamented how sad it must be for Victor and Althea to have a daughter who had forgotten her roots. Some even suggested that Isolde was the true heir, the only child who truly embodied the Delacroix name. A lump formed in my throat. My fingers clenched into fists. Of course! I should have known. A sharp vibration on the table made me flinch. My phone screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in weeks. Victor Delacroix. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the decline button. Then, against my better judgment, I answered. The line was silent for a moment before his voice came through, smooth, unhurried. You should have played along, Syrah. I exhaled slowly, gripping my phone tighter. Tell me you're not behind this, I said, my voice dangerously low. Victor chuckled softly. Come now. You and I both know how the world works. You made a mistake, and now you're facing the consequences. I clenched my jaw. You mean I refused to let you manipulate Isolde? Such an ungrateful perspective. His tone was almost amused. You should be thanking us. Do you think anyone would care about you if not for our name? A cold chill ran through me. You don't get to rewrite history, Victor, I spat. Everything I have, I built. You weren't there. Not when I was studying until dawn, not when I was working 20-hour shifts to prove myself. You didn't lift a damn finger." He sighed, as if I were a petulant child. "That's where you've always misunderstood. You were never meant to be the heir, Sarah. You were a placeholder. Isolde was always the one who mattered." The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. All the years of striving, of proving myself, of trying to be acknowledged, it had been for nothing. I squeezed my eyes shut, inhaling sharply. "Go to hell," I whispered. Victor let out a slow, deliberate breath. "Be careful, my dear. If you continue down this path, you may not like what you find." The line went dead. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed against my ear. The finality of his words settled into my bones. Number not this time. Xavier's office was dimly lit, the skyline of New York stretching behind him. He looked up as I entered, his expression already set in concern. "I saw the article," he said, pushing a newspaper across the desk. "And the others." I barely glanced at it before sinking into the chair opposite him. "They're trying to bury me," he nodded. "And it's working." I swallowed back the rage boiling in my chest. "So what? I should just roll over and let them?" Xavier leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. "Number, but if you fight back the way they expect you to, you'll lose. They control the media. They control the narrative." I stared at him. "Then what do I do?" "Be smarter." I let out a bitter laugh. "Great. Any specifics, or should I just sit here and meditate until inspiration hits?" Xavier sighed, rubbing his temple. "You need allies, people who know how this game works." I pressed my fingers to my temples. My entire life was being dismantled piece by piece, and I had no way to stop it. My career, my credibility, everything I had fought for. Unless... A thought struck me. A reckless, dangerous thought. Xavier's eyes narrowed as he watched me. "Sarah, whatever you're thinking..." I ignored him. Instead, I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. My heart pounded as I hesitated over a name I hadn't seen in years. I pressed call. The line rang once, twice. Then a voice came through. Familiar, distant. "Sarah?" A pause. "I didn't expect to hear from you. I need your help." My voice was steady, but my fingers gripped the phone like a lifeline. The silence on the other end stretched, heavy and uncertain. Then, finally, a quiet sigh. "I figured this call was coming," the voice said. I exhaled slowly. "I wouldn't have made it if I had another choice." The line crackled slightly before the voice responded. "Meet me in an hour. We'll talk." I hung up, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. My own eyes looked unfamiliar. Tired, hardened, carrying a weight I hadn't realized I was holding until now. Then, my phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't a call. A new headline flashed across my screen. My stomach twisted. They had gone after Xavier. The morning light barely touched my apartment, casting long shadows across the room. I sat on the edge of my couch, scrolling through one article after another, each one worse than the last. The scandal had spread, spiraling beyond just me. Now they were dragging Xavier into it. Fashion powerhouse, Xavier Sinclair, faces backlash for ties to Sarah Delacroix scandal. Elite brands reevaluate contracts amidst Delacroix. Controversy. Is loyalty to the wrong person costing Sinclair? His empire? My hands tightened around my phone. They were coming after anyone close to me. And Xavier, he had spent years building his name, crafting a career independent of his family's wealth. Now, because of me, they were trying to rip it all away. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic flickered beneath my skin. He had always answered before. A text popped up on my screen. My breath caught as I read it. "We need to talk. Meet me at the studio." I rushed through the city, weaving through the early morning crowd. My mind was spinning. This was never supposed to touch him. When I reached the studio, the receptionist barely had time to nod at me before I pushed through the doors. Inside, The space was eerily quiet. Xavier's usually bustling team was nowhere to be seen. Xavier stood near the large drafting table, hands braced against the edge, staring down at a stack of papers. He didn't look up as I approached. Xavier. I started carefully. He exhaled sharply, finally lifting his gaze to mine. His face was unreadable, but there was tension in his jaw, in the way his fingers curled into his palms. Sarah, what the hell is happening? His voice was controlled, but barely. Half my investors are pulling back. 3 brands canceled their collaborations overnight, and I just got a call from my PR team warning me that if I don't distance myself from you, my entire business could take a hit. Guilt slammed into me like a freight train. I didn't mean for this to happen, I whispered. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Yeah? Well, it's happening. I looked away, my throat tight. I'll fix this. He shook his head, frustration flashing in his eyes. How, Sarah? Your parents aren't just playing a game. They're launching a full-scale attack, and I'm collateral damage. A sharp pang of anger cut through the guilt. Then don't stand on the sidelines. I met his stare, unwavering. You think I don't know how dangerous they are? They've spent my entire life making sure I understood. But I'm not backing down. Xavier studied me for a long moment. Then, finally, he sighed, rubbing his temples. You're impossible, he muttered. A small smile ghosted my lips. You've always known that. He gave me a long look before shaking his head. Fine. Whatever you're planning, I'm in. But I swear to God, if you get me blacklisted in this industry... I cut him off. I'm done playing defense. It's time they feel the consequences. The coffee shop was quiet, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. The kind of place where secrets could be spoken without fear of eavesdroppers. Across from me sat Marianne Delacroix, my aunt. She was once a force in the Delacroix empire, but years ago she walked away. No one ever said why. You always were a fighter, she mused, stirring her tea. I didn't smile. I need information. She raised an eyebrow. You're coming to me for help? That's a first. I clenched my jaw. I wouldn't be here if I had a choice. Marianne leaned back in her chair, studying me. You're serious about this, aren't you? I met her gaze, unflinching. They destroyed my reputation. They tried to trap Isolde into a marriage for their financial gain. And now they're targeting the people I care about. I paused. I'm not asking you to pick a side. I just need the truth. A beat of silence, then, slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive. Your parents have spent years covering up their financial problems, but even the best liars leave trails. She slid the drive across the table. If you want to destroy them, this is how you do it. I picked it up, feeling the weight of what was inside. This was it. The weapon I needed, and I was going to use it. I gripped the USB tightly, my mind racing. They have no idea what's coming next. I slid the drive into my coat pocket and walked out of the cafe, the cold air of the city hitting me like a shock. Marianne had given me exactly what I needed, evidence that could ruin my parents for good. But something in her voice, the way she had hesitated before handing it over, unsettled me. I needed to move fast. The restaurant was dimly lit, filled with hushed voices and the soft clinking of silverware. I sat across from Marianne, swirling the wine in my glass, watching her carefully. You look tense, I said, breaking the silence. Marianne sighed, placing her napkin down. Sarah, I told you I'd help you, and I meant it. But before you go any further, you need to understand what you're up against. I leaned forward. Enlighten me. She studied me for a moment before continuing. Victor isn't just trying to save face. He's desperate, and desperate men do dangerous things. I waited, sensing there was more. She exhaled slowly. He's brought in Victor Radcliffe. The name sent a prickle of unease down my spine. You know who he is? She asked. I nodded. Of course I did. Radcliffe wasn't just a businessman. He was a shark, Ruthless. The kind of man who didn't just win deals, he crushed his competitors into the dirt. And if my father had partnered with him, "This isn't just about controlling Isolde anymore," Marianne said. "Radcliffe is the kind of man who eliminates problems. Permanently." I swallowed, pushing away the small wave of fear curling in my stomach. "Then it's time I make the first move," I said. Marianne watched me for a long moment, then sighed. "Be careful, Sarah. You're not just fighting your parents anymore." Isolde sat alone in her apartment, the engagement contract spread out on the coffee table before her. The expensive paper, the elegant lettering, it should have reassured her. Instead, it made her feel sick. She rubbed her temples and read the contract again, her eyes scanning over the fine print. And then she saw it. Her hands clenched into fists. The clause was buried deep, almost an afterthought, a legal loophole that tied her financially to the Radcliffe family's assets, not just a marriage, an acquisition. She let out a shaky breath. Sarah had warned her. She had insisted that this wasn't about love, that their parents were using her for leverage. Isolde had refused to believe it. But now, she grabbed her phone, hesitating. She couldn't call Sarah, not yet. Instead, she dialed another number. "Hey," she said when the voice on the other end answered. "I need you to look at something for me." Her lawyer friend agreed to review the contract. When they called back an hour later, their voice was laced with horror. "Isolde, this isn't a marriage agreement. It's a financial takeover." She barely heard the rest of what they said. Her fingers trembled as she ended the call. She looked down at her phone again, at Sarah's number staring back at her. I need to talk to her. But what if she's right? I was halfway through pouring a drink when my phone buzzed. I frowned at the unknown number flashing on the screen. Who the hell is calling me at this hour? I hesitated, then answered. "Who is this?" A deep chuckle filled the line. Cold, calculated. "Miss Delacroix?" The voice drawled. "I do hope I'm not disturbing you." My stomach twisted. "Victor Radcliffe." I straightened, forcing my voice to remain calm. "I'd say I'm surprised, but I'm really not." Another laugh. "Then you already know why I'm calling." I said nothing. Radcliffe continued. "You've been quite a thorn in your father's side." "A shame, really. You could have had a comfortable life, but instead you've chosen war." I gritted my teeth. "I chose the truth." A pause. Then, "Truth is a funny thing. It can be twisted, contorted, made to disappear." A chill ran down my spine. "You think you scare me?" I asked, my voice sharper than I felt. Radcliffe hummed in amusement. "Not yet. But you should be scared, Miss Delacroix, because if you continue down this path, you'll lose more than your reputation." I felt my hands shake, but I tightened my grip on the phone. "I'm not backing down." A slow exhale. Pity. The line went dead. I stood there, the silence of my apartment pressing in around me. My heart pounded against my ribs. This wasn't just about family anymore. This was war. A sudden knock on my door made me jump. I spun around, my pulse still racing. I moved toward the door cautiously and peered through the peephole. My breath caught. Isolde stood outside, her face pale, tears in her eyes. I hesitated for only a second before yanking the door open. "Izzy?" My voice was barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" Isolde stepped inside, her face pale, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, you were right." I froze. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't react. The words I had been waiting to hear for so long finally came, yet they didn't bring me relief, only a sharp, painful twist in my chest. She looked exhausted. Dark circles framed her usually bright eyes, and she hugged her arms tightly, as if holding herself together. I gestured toward the couch, and she sank into it, her hands trembling in her lap. I sat across from her, waiting, letting the silence stretch until she was ready to speak. "I read the contract again," she admitted, her voice hoarse. "I had a lawyer look at it too. It's not just a marriage agreement, it's a deal, a way to lock me into their control. She let out a hollow laugh. They never wanted me to be happy, did they? I exhaled slowly. No, Izzy, they never did. Her hands curled into fists. I feel like such an idiot. I trusted them. I thought they wanted what was best for me. I leaned forward. You're not an idiot. You were raised to believe in them, just like I was. I hesitated before adding, but there's no going back now. Her eyes met mine, glassy with unshed tears. I know. For the first time, a sliver of hope flickered inside me. She was finally seeing the truth, finally breaking free. A sharp chime shattered the moment. Isolde glanced at her phone, and I saw her face drain of color. Her hands shook as she held up the screen. They know I'm here. A message from Althea. Short, cold. Come home. Now I crossed my arms, watching as Isolde stared down at her phone. Then it's time we stop hiding. She looked at me, uncertain. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. We're going to the party, together. The Delacroix mansion was glowing under a sea of golden lights, the driveway filled with luxury cars. The air buzzed with anticipation, the elite of New York gathering for Isolde's grand birthday celebration, a perfect stage for a public spectacle. As we stepped out of the car, the murmurs started. Heads turned, eyes widened. People weren't expecting me to be here, standing beside my sister. Isolde hesitated, her fingers twitching at her side. I reached for her hand, squeezing it once. She squeezed back. Inside, the ballroom was exquisite, decorated in deep blues and shimmering gold. The scent of roses and expensive champagne lingered in the air. Music played softly, and laughter drifted through the space. It was a scene of perfection, the Delacroix name shining like a beacon of power. Until we stepped in. The whispers grew louder. Victor and Althea stood near the center of the room, their smiles frozen in place. I saw the flicker of rage in my father's eyes, the barely contained fury in my mother's stiff posture. I grabbed the microphone from the stage before they could stop me. Good evening, everyone! My voice rang out through the speakers, silencing the crowd. Althea's face twisted in a forced smile. Syrah, this is hardly the time. Oh, I think it's the perfect time. I turned toward the guests. You all know the Delacroix family. You've seen the polished image, the extravagant parties, the perfect legacy. I let out a dry laugh. But let's talk about the truth, shall we? The murmurs grew. Victor took a step forward, but I raised a hand. I wouldn't if I were you. I turned back to the crowd. Did you know that my parents arranged a marriage for Isolde? A business deal, disguised as love? Did you know they planned to trade her off like a commodity, tying her financially to a man they barely know, all to save themselves? Gasps rippled through the room. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances. Cameras started flashing. Victor's mask cracked. Enough! But I wasn't done. The Delacroix empire isn't as untouchable as you think, I continued, my heart pounding. They're drowning in debt. Their company is crumbling, and they've spent years covering up the truth. Althea's eyes darted around, realizing the attention was shifting. The press had been invited to this event. There was no containing this now. Victor lost control. His face turned red, his voice booming through the hall. How dare you! The room fell into stunned silence. I stared at him, unflinching. You can't control me anymore. The room was in chaos. Guests whispered behind their hands, some pulling out their phones to record. The Delacroix image was shattering in real time. Victor's voice thundered. You were never part of this family. You were a mistake, an embarrassment. You think anyone here cares about you? The words should have hurt. Once they would have. But now they barely registered. Althea turned to Isolde, her voice softer, more insidious. Sweetheart, don't let her ruin this for you. You can still fix this. Walk away from her. Isolde's face twisted with conflict. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, waiting. She needed to decide. The seconds dragged on, the weight of the moment pressing on everyone in the room. And then, slowly, she took a step forward. toward me. Gasps filled the air. Victor's expression twisted in fury. Althea's mouth parted in shock. Isolde lifted her chin, her voice shaking but clear. I choose my sister. Victor's face twisted with fury, his voice ice cold. Then you're no daughter of mine. The room was so silent I could hear the faint clinking of a champagne flute as someone shifted uncomfortably. The weight of his words hung in the air, suffocating. Isolde flinched. I saw the moment her resolve wavered, the slight tremble in her fingers as she clenched them into fists. For years, she had been their perfect daughter, the golden child who could do no wrong. And now, in front of an audience of New York's elite, he had cast her out like she was nothing. Althea took a slow step forward, her voice softer but no less cutting. Darling, don't do this. Think about what you're throwing away. Isolde's lips parted, but no words came. She looked lost, torn between the identity she had known all her life and the truth that had finally forced its way into her reality. She already made her choice, I said, stepping closer to my sister, my voice firm. And for once, it was her choice, not yours. Victor's gaze snapped to me, his mouth curling into something cruel. You did this. You poisoned her mind against her family. I let out a bitter laugh. She's not a puppet, Victor. Maybe that's what scares you the most. He exhaled sharply, jaw tightening. Get out! No one in the crowd moved. No one spoke. The Delacroix name had commanded respect for decades, and now, in a single night, its foundation was crumbling. Didn't you hear me? Victor's voice rose, fury barely contained. You're both dead to me. Isolde's breath hitched. I saw the grief flash across her face, the pain of losing the only family she had ever known. But I also saw something else beneath it, a quiet, growing strength. I reached for her hand. Then let's go. The second we stepped outside, the flashing lights were blinding. A wall of cameras, reporters, and onlookers waited, their voices merging into a chaotic blur. Sarah! Isolde! What happened inside? Is it true Victor Delacroix disowned you? Isolde, do you regret your decision? I kept my grip on Isolde's hand, pulling her through the crowd as she struggled to process the sudden shift in her reality. Just minutes ago, she had been the treasured daughter of New York's most powerful family. Now, she was a headline. Isolde stumbled slightly, and I wrapped an arm around her, shielding her as best I could. Ignore them, I murmured. Just keep moving. We barely made it into the car when my phone vibrated. A notification. I glanced down, and my stomach twisted. Victor and Althea had released a statement. We are heartbroken by our daughter Isolde's recent actions. Sarah Delacroix has always sought to divide this family, and unfortunately, she has now dragged her sister into her vendetta. We continue to pray that Isolde will come to her senses and return to the family that loves her. My grip tightened around the phone. Unbelievable! Isolde stared blankly at the screen, her expression unreadable. They're making me look like a weak, confused child. That's what they do, I said. They rewrite the truth to fit their narrative. She exhaled shakily. What if I made a mistake, Sarah? I turned to her, my voice gentle but firm. Do you believe you made a mistake? Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. But... Her phone buzzed in her lap. She picked it up hesitantly, then froze. I frowned. What is it? She turned the screen toward me, her voice barely a whisper. What does Raphael Radcliffe want? I glanced at the message, my jaw tightening. We're about to find out. Hours later, we stood outside an exclusive penthouse, high above the city. The air inside was thick with the scent of expensive whiskey and cigar smoke. The ambiance designed to intimidate. Raphael was waiting. He stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass in his hand, looking as composed as ever. He was everything our parents had wanted for Isolde. Powerful, poised, untouchable. Isolde shifted beside me, visibly uneasy. I didn't blame her. This wasn't just a social call. Raphael finally turned, his gaze settling on Isolde, with something close to amusement. You've certainly made things interesting. Isolde straightened her shoulders. I assume you didn't call me here for pleasantries. He smirked. Number I wanted to see for myself. She frowned. See what? He stepped forward, setting his drink aside. If you're truly done being a Delacroix, or if this is just another rebellion you'll grow out of. My hands curled into fists. Is that what my parents told you? He barely glanced at me. They don't need to. I understand how people like them think. He looked back at Isolde. And I understand you. You're scared. Everything you've ever known just disappeared, and now you're wondering if you made the right choice. Isolde didn't respond, but I saw the tension in her shoulders. Raphael continued, his voice calm, persuasive. Your parents may have mishandled things, but you know as well as I do. Power matters. Influence matters. Do you really think walking away from them will set you free? A heavy silence stretched between them. You can still fix this, he said, stepping closer. Come back. Reinforce the deal. Marry me. He extended a hand. You'll never have to worry about anything again. Isolde stared at him. I held my breath, watching the war play out in her eyes. Temptation, fear, doubt. Raphael tilted his head slightly, his voice smooth but firm. One last chance, Isolde. What's it going to be? Isolde looked at me, her heart pounding so hard I could almost hear it. I don't know. Her fingers clenched the edge of the chair, knuckles turning white. Across from us, Raphael leaned back in his seat, watching her like a predator studying his prey. The offer still lingered in the air between them. Wealth, power, security, everything she had ever known. I didn't speak. I didn't push. This was her moment. Raphael exhaled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Isolde, you don't have to struggle. You don't have to start over. His voice was smooth, persuasive. All of this? It's already yours. You just have to take it. I could see the temptation flicker in her eyes. A lifetime of privilege, of never having to fight for a thing. Walking away from it wasn't easy. She had never needed to before. For a moment, I thought she might give in. Then she lifted her chin, inhaling sharply. No. Raphael raised an eyebrow. I won't be a pawn in their game anymore, she said, voice shaking but firm. I'm done letting them decide my life for me. A strange silence followed. Raphael set his glass down, with deliberate slowness. Then he smirked. Interesting choice, Isolde. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Let's see how long you last without them. She stiffened, but didn't back down. I reached for her hand, squeezing it once. I guess we'll find out, she murmured. The Delacroix Enterprises headquarters was chaos. Victor stood in his office, eyes locked on the numbers flashing across his computer screen. His hands clenched into fists, the veins in his neck bulging with restrained fury. Investors were pulling out. Clients were severing contracts. The once unshakable Delacroix empire was crumbling beneath him. Althea paced beside him, her normally composed expression unraveling. We can fix this, she muttered, more to herself than to him. We've survived worse. Victor slammed his hand against the desk. Not like this. The financial leaks had been brutal. The carefully curated illusion of their wealth and influence had shattered. And the world was watching. His phone buzzed. He snatched it up. Isolde. His breath steadied. He put the call on speaker. You've had your fun, he said, his voice dangerously low. Now come home. Silence. Then, no. Victor's grip tightened around the phone. You are making a mistake. I'm making my own decision, Isolde said. For once in my life. Victor exhaled sharply. Do you really think you can survive without us? I guess we'll find out. The call ended. Althea's face was unreadable, but I saw the flicker of something dangerous in her eyes. Victor's hand curled into a fist. If she won't come back willingly. He exhaled through his nose, voice trembling with rage. I'll make her regret this. I was sitting at my kitchen table when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. A new message. It was from an unknown number. I opened it, my stomach tightening. If you won't come back willingly, I'll make you regret this. I sucked in a breath. My fingers gripped the phone tighter. He wouldn't dare. But the truth was, I wasn't sure. Isolde's apartment was small, modest, a far cry from the luxury she had grown up in. But it was hers. She stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed, staring at the space like she was still trying to believe it was real. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal. There was no staff, no security, no endless resources at her fingertips. Just her. Feels weird, doesn't it? I said, leaning against the kitchen counter. She let out a small, breathy laugh. Yeah, it does. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the fear she wouldn't say out loud. She had spent her entire life as a Delacroix, and now she was just… Isolde. You'll get used to it, I said. You'll figure it out. She met my gaze, searching. How did you do it, Sarah? I exhaled. The hard way. She nodded slowly, taking that in. Can I ask you something? She said after a moment. Of course. She hesitated. Are you proud of me? The question caught me off guard. I walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. Yeah, Izzy. I am. Her eyes shimmered, but she quickly blinked it away. Okay. A small, fragile smile touched her lips. She was still scared, but she was standing on her own. For the first time, she was free. The envelope arrived the next morning. Isolde found it first, sitting on her doorstep. No name, no return address. She brought it inside, her fingers unsteady as she opened it. A single sheet of paper fell into her hands. One sentence. You think this is over? Her breath hitched. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the note from her hands, reading it twice. My fingers curled around the paper. This wasn't over, not even close. I grabbed the letter, my eyes narrowing. They're not done yet. Isolde stood frozen across the room, her arms wrapped around herself. The letter sat on the table between us, its message stark and simple. No signature, no return address, just a single line that sent a shiver down my spine. You think this is over? Silence stretched between us, heavy and unspoken. Do you think it's from him? Isolde finally asked, voice barely above a whisper. I exhaled, shaking my head. It could be Victor. It could be Raphael. Hell, it could be someone we don't even know about yet. Her fingers tightened around the fabric of her sweater. It feels personal. I met her gaze. She wasn't wrong. This wasn't a random threat. This was a promise. Someone still had a stake in this fight. Maybe it's just another scare tactic, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. And maybe it's time we stop reacting to their games. Isolde hesitated, clearly unconvinced. What if ignoring it makes it worse? I ran a hand through my hair. Then we deal with it, but we don't let it control us. Before she could respond, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and felt my breath catch. Mom. Isolde's eyes widened as she saw the name flash across the screen. She never calls, I muttered. The ringing continued, filling the room like an alarm neither of us could ignore. I hesitated, then finally swiped to answer. Hello? A beat of silence. Then, Sarah. Althea's voice was softer than I had ever heard it. Almost hesitant. We need to talk. I met her in a small cafe tucked into a quiet part of the city, away from the usual crowd of high society. She had chosen the place, which surprised me. My mother had never been the type to linger in places that lacked prestige. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Althea Delacroix, the woman who once walked through rooms with effortless grace, always polished, always composed, looked tired. The lines around her eyes were deeper, her usually impeccable hair slightly undone. She was still elegant, still regal, but there was something missing, something broken. I took a slow breath and sat across from her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. You look well, she finally said, her voice measured. I let out a dry laugh. I doubt that's why you called me here. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Number, it's not. I leaned back. Then say what you need to say. She hesitated, fingers tightening around her coffee cup. I was wrong. I blinked, caught off guard. She exhaled, eyes dropping to the table. I let your father dictate everything. I let him convince me that you were dangerous, that you were a threat to the family, and I let myself believe it because it was easier than facing the truth. I crossed my arms. Which was, she swallowed, that he was the one who saw you as a threat, not because you were weak, but because you weren't controllable. I let the words settle, waiting for the sting of them to hit, but strangely, they didn't. Why now? I asked. She looked up, her gaze weary. Because I lost both of you, and because, for the first time in my life, I'm not sure if I can fix it. I studied her carefully, searching for the lie, but there wasn't one. You think an apology changes things? I asked. Her lips parted slightly, then closed. Finally, she shook her head. Number, I don't. Something inside me loosened, just slightly. Althea Delacroix never admitted defeat, never showed doubt, never let cracks show in her armor. But here she was, acknowledging, maybe for the first time, that she had helped destroy everything she was trying to hold on to. I sighed, rubbing my temple. I don't know if I can forgive you. She nodded, as if she had expected that. I don't know if I deserve it. I glanced at the clock. I should go. I started to rise, but then, it was never supposed to be you, Sarah. I froze. Her voice wavered, something unreadable in her tone. But I was too afraid to stop it. I turned back slowly, my stomach tightening. What do you mean? Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Victor always had a plan for Isolde. She was his perfect heir, his golden child. You were never supposed to be in the picture. But then you started succeeding. You built a life outside of his control. I narrowed my eyes. So he tried to erase me instead? She exhaled. In his eyes, yes. Something cold settled in my chest. I didn't know what answer I had been expecting, but it didn't make this truth any easier to swallow. I took one last look at her before turning toward the door. This conversation was over. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my phone. For the first time in years, I scrolled through old messages from my father. I read them one by one, looking for something, anything, that might make me feel something. Anger, sadness, but all I felt was distance. Isolde walked in, excitement buzzing around her. I got a job offer. I looked up. That's amazing, she beamed. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I start next week. I smiled. She was building her own life, her own path, and for the first time, I believed she would be okay. I glanced back at my phone. Victor's name still sat in my contacts, a lingering shadow of the past. Slowly, deliberately, I deleted his number. No hesitation, no second thoughts. For the first time, I was truly free. Then my phone buzzed. A new message, an unknown number. I frowned, opening it. You've won, but this isn't over. My blood ran cold. I had been so sure that the war was ending, but now I wasn't so sure. I exhaled, shaking my head. Of course it isn't. The phone screen glowed in the dim light of my apartment. The words, "You've won, but this isn't over," still burning into my retinas. My stomach twisted, but I wasn't surprised. The Delacroix family never lost without retaliation. A second message popped up. A link. I clicked it, already knowing I wouldn't like what I saw. It was an article, and the headline made my blood turn ice cold. Isolde Delacroix. A fallen heiress spiraling out of control? I skimmed the piece, my grip on the phone tightening with every word. The article painted her as weak, unstable, unable to function without the family's wealth and influence. It hinted that she was emotionally vulnerable, suggested she might be struggling with addiction, and speculated whether she would come crawling back to her parents before she self-destructed. It was calculated, ruthless. This wasn't just a hit piece, it was a leash. They weren't just trying to ruin her reputation. They were trying to scare her into coming back. Isolde stepped into the room, her hair still damp from the shower. "Sarah?" I turned the phone toward her. She read the headline, and for a moment, she didn't react. Then, her face crumpled. "They're trying to break you," I said. "But we're not letting that happen." She swallowed hard. "What do we do?" I picked up my phone again, my voice cold and steady as I dialed. "We're ending this. Now." The deep voice on the other end of the line didn't sound surprised. "I was wondering when you'd call." Lucas Moreau, a journalist with a reputation for exposing corruption in high places. He had been the one to break the financial scandal about Delacroix Enterprises weeks ago, and I knew he wasn't done yet. "I have a story for you," I said. There was a pause. "You sure you want to go this route?" They started this fight. My fingers tapped against the table. "I'm just making sure they don't get the last word." An hour later, I was sitting in a private booth at an upscale restaurant, staring across the table at the man who could help me take them down. Lucas leaned back in his seat, watching me carefully. "You want to go public?" I nodded. "You understand what that means, right? This isn't just about financial corruption anymore. It's about your family, your name." I met his gaze. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Isolde sat beside me, tense, silent. I could feel the conflict radiating from her. "Sarah." She hesitated. "If we do this, it's forever. There's no fixing this." I turned to her. "There was never going to be a way to fix this, Izzy. Not after everything they've done." She looked down, her hands curled into fists in her lap. Lucas exhaled, studying me for a long moment. Then, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small recorder. He slid it across the table. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I pressed the record button, steadying my voice. "Let's talk about the Delacroix legacy." The next morning, the headlines exploded. "Delacroix heiress speaks out. A family's dark secrets unveiled." I sat in the green room of a national news station, microphone clipped to my blouse, waiting for the segment to go live. The interview had already been recorded, but this was the first time the world would see it. I had told them everything: the financial fraud, the manipulation, the arranged marriage contract, how Victor and Althea had spent years controlling their daughters, bending them to fit the perfect image, and I had proof: documents, emails, signed agreements. The Delacroix name was under siege. I stared at the television screen as the broadcast began. My own face filled the screen, my voice clear, unwavering. "This isn't about revenge," I heard myself say. "It's about the truth. My parents built their empire on illusion, and I refuse to be part of that illusion any longer." Isolde sat beside me, silent. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she didn't look away. Then, my phone buzzed. A new notification. I glanced down, and my breath caught in my throat. A breaking news alert. Victor Delacroix presses criminal charges against estranged daughter. My vision blurred. "What?" Isolde whispered. I clicked the article, scanning the words at lightning speed. My father had accused me of stealing proprietary business documents that could be classified as company property. They weren't just suing me. They were trying to put me behind bars. Isolde gasped, gripping her phone. "Sarah, what did they just do?" I didn't answer right away. My eyes were still locked on the headline. Victor Delacroix presses criminal charges against estranged daughter. The air in the apartment was thick with tension. My phone buzzed relentlessly with messages, emails, and missed calls. News sites were already running with the story, speculating what this meant for me, and for the Delacroix name. "Fraud?" Isolde whispered, reading over my shoulder. "They're accusing you of fraud?" I exhaled through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. "They're claiming I leaked confidential company documents. They want to paint me as a bitter daughter out for revenge." Isolde paced the room, panic rising in her voice. "Sarah, this isn't just a lawsuit. This is criminal. If they win, I cut her off. I know! She stopped, staring at me, searching for some sign of fear. But I wouldn't give them that. Before she could say anything else, a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. I turned toward the door, already knowing what was waiting for me. Slowly, I opened it. A man in a suit stood there, holding a thick envelope. Sarah Delacroix? I nodded. He handed me the papers. You've been served. Isolde was pacing again, her hands trembling. Sarah, we have to fight this. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the legal documents. My lawyer, Daniel Brooks, was already on speakerphone, his voice calm but serious. This is a power move, he said. Victor knows you have enough dirt on him to ruin him in the court of public opinion, so he's taking this to actual court instead, where his money and influence give him the upper hand. I rubbed my temple. What are our options? 2, Daniel said. We fight it, which will take months, maybe years. Or, I pressed, we give him something bigger to worry about. I looked up, meeting Isolde's gaze. She knew exactly what that meant. She swallowed hard. I don't want to see him in prison, Sarah. My jaw tightened. After everything he's done, he's still our father. Her voice was small, conflicted. He stopped being our father the second he tried to put me in prison, I shot back. Isolde sat down, looking lost. I softened my tone. Izzy, I need to know where you stand. Are you with me, or are you still trying to save him? Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know. I didn't push. Not yet. Daniel sighed on the other end of the call. Look, if you want to fight back, we need leverage. Something that makes this lawsuit the least of his worries. Silence. Then, there's something I never told you about Dad, Isolde murmured. I turned to her sharply. Daniel spoke first. What do you mean? She hesitated, her fingers twisting together. I overheard something once, years ago, a name. I leaned forward. What name? She wet her lips. Ever heard of Sebastian Vaughn? My stomach dropped. Daniel cursed. Are you serious? I didn't know much about Vaughn, but I knew enough. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a power broker, the kind of man who made people disappear. Isolde's voice was barely above a whisper. I think Dad did business with him. I inhaled sharply. Izzy, do you understand what you're saying? She nodded, her face pale. I was 16. I heard Dad on the phone with him. He was talking about shifting assets, hiding money. I didn't understand at the time, but now, she swallowed. Now, I think it was illegal. Daniel's voice was grim. If Victor was laundering money for Vaughn, this is way bigger than a family feud. We'd need proof. I turned back to Isolde. Are you sure about this? Her expression hardened. I'm sure. I took a deep breath. This wasn't just about protecting ourselves anymore. This was about ending Victor Delacroix. I reached across the table, gripping Isolde's hand. This is how we end him. The federal investigator's voice was steady, but there was a note of curiosity beneath it. You said you have information on Victor Delacroix? I gripped the phone tightly, inhaling slowly. Yes, I said. And it's enough to bring him down. The sterile scent of the federal office filled my lungs as I walked in, Isolde close behind me. Her hand trembled slightly at her side, but she didn't turn back. We were led into a small, windowless room. The investigator, a sharp-eyed man in his 40s, motioned for us to sit. He introduced himself as Agent Kessler, and without wasting a moment, he got straight to the point. You understand what you're doing here? He asked. I met his gaze. Yes. Isolde hesitated, but after a deep breath, she nodded too. I pulled out the documents, the notes Isolde had given me, the ones implicating our father in financial crimes that went beyond fraud. Kessler flipped through them, expression unreadable. Then he leaned back. We've been watching Victor Delacroix for years, he admitted. But every time we got close, the trail went cold. No witnesses, no paper trail, just whispers. I exhaled. Not anymore. Kessler tapped his fingers against the desk, considering. If we act on this, he'll know exactly who turned him in. Are you prepared for that? I didn't hesitate. He already made his move. This is ours. The agent studied me for a long moment, then nodded. This is enough to open a full investigation. But be warned, once we go after him, he won't go down quietly. Fraud? Isolde whispered, reading over my shoulder. They're accusing you of fraud? I exhaled through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. They're claiming I leaked confidential company documents. They want to paint me as a bitter daughter out for revenge. Isolde paced the room, panic rising in her voice. Sarah, this isn't just a lawsuit. This is criminal. If they win, I cut her off. I know. She stopped, staring at me, searching for some sign of fear. But I wouldn't give them that. Before she could say anything else, a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. I turned toward the door, already knowing what was waiting for me. Slowly, I opened it. A man in a suit stood there, holding a thick envelope. Sarah Delacroix? I nodded. He handed me the papers. You've been served. Isolde was pacing again, her hands trembling. Sarah, we have to fight this. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the legal documents. My lawyer, Daniel Brooks, was already on speakerphone, his voice calm but serious. This is a power move, he said. Victor knows you have enough dirt on him to ruin him in the court of public opinion, so he's taking this to actual court instead, where his money and influence give him the upper hand. I rubbed my temple. What are our options? 2, Daniel said. We fight it, which will take months, maybe years. Or, I pressed, we give him something bigger to worry about. I looked up, meeting Isolde's gaze. She knew exactly what that meant. She swallowed hard. I don't want to see him in prison, Sarah. My jaw tightened. After everything he's done, he's still our father. Her voice was small, conflicted. He stopped being our father the second he tried to put me in prison. I shot back. Isolde sat down, looking lost. I softened my tone. Izzy, I need to know where you stand. Are you with me, or are you still trying to save him? Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know. I didn't push. Not yet. Daniel sighed on the other end of the call. Look, if you want to fight back, we need leverage. Something that makes this lawsuit the least of his worries. Silence. Then, there's something I never told you about Dad, Isolde murmured. I turned to her sharply. Daniel spoke first. What do you mean? She hesitated, her fingers twisting together. I overheard something once. Years ago, a name. I leaned forward. What name? She wet her lips. Ever heard of Sebastian Vaughn? My stomach dropped. Daniel cursed. Are you serious? I didn't know much about Vaughn, but I knew enough. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a power broker, the kind of man who made people disappear. Isolde's voice was barely above a whisper. I think Dad did business with him. I inhaled sharply. Izzy, do you understand what you're saying? She nodded, her face pale. I was 16. I heard Dad on the phone with him. He was talking about shifting assets, hiding money. I didn't understand at the time. But now, she swallowed. Now, I think it was illegal. Daniel's voice was grim. If Victor was laundering money for Vaughn, this is way bigger than a family feud. We'd need proof. I turned back to Isolde. Are you sure about this? Her expression hardened. I'm sure. I took a deep breath. This wasn't just about protecting ourselves anymore. This was about ending Victor Delacroix. I reached across the table, gripping Isolde's hand. This is how we end him. The federal investigator's voice was steady, but there was a note of curiosity beneath it. You said you have information on Victor Delacroix? I gripped the phone tightly, inhaling slowly. Yes, I said. And it's enough to bring him down. The sterile scent of the federal office filled my lungs as I walked in, Isolde close behind me. Her hand trembled slightly at her side, but she didn't turn back. We were led into a small windowless room. The investigator, a sharp-eyed man in his 40s, motioned for us to sit. He introduced himself as Agent Kessler, and without wasting a moment, he got straight to the point. "You understand what you're doing here?" he asked. I met his gaze. "Yes." Isolde hesitated, but after a deep breath, she nodded too. I pulled out the documents, the notes Isolde had given me, the ones implicating our father in financial crimes that went beyond fraud. Kessler flipped through them, expression unreadable. Then he leaned back. "We've been watching Victor Delacroix for years," he admitted. "But every time we got close, the trail went cold. No witnesses, no paper trail, just whispers." I exhaled. "Not anymore." Kessler tapped his fingers against the desk, considering. "If we act on this, he'll know exactly who turned him in. Are you prepared for that?" I didn't hesitate. "He already made his move. This is ours." The agent studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "This is enough to open a full investigation. But be warned, once we go after him, he won't go down quietly." Isolde swallowed hard. I reached over, squeezing her hand. "We're ready," I said. As we walked out of the office, the weight of what we had just done settled over me. The choice was made. There was no undoing it now. Then, just as we stepped outside, I felt it. An eerie sensation, like someone was watching us. Across the street, a black SUV was parked, windows tinted. A shadowed figure inside tilted their head slightly, as if acknowledging our presence. I felt a chill run down my spine. "They're making their move," a voice murmured. Glass shattered against the wall. Victor stood in his penthouse office, his expression twisted with rage. "They really think they can destroy me?" Althea sat across from him, hands folded in her lap. But she wasn't her usual composed self. She was pale, eyes unfocused. "Victor, they went to the feds," she murmured. "You need to stop this." He turned to her, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Stop?" He chuckled darkly. "No, Althea, this isn't the end. This is war." The meeting request came late that evening. Althea wanted to see me, alone. I almost didn't go, but curiosity, and something deeper, made me agree. The lounge was dimly lit, filled with the quiet hum of conversation. My mother sat at a private corner table, a single glass of wine in front of her. I approached cautiously, but she looked different. Her usual air of untouchable grace was gone. Her posture was slumped, dark circles under her eyes. For the first time in my life, Althea Delacroix looked human. I sat across from her, waiting. "Victor is losing control," she said, her voice quiet. I raised an eyebrow. "He never had it." She flinched slightly. "You don't understand. You think you've won, but you don't know what he's capable of when he feels cornered." I leaned forward. "Then tell me." She sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. "I should have left him years ago, but power is a prison, Sarah, and I was too afraid to be nothing." I blinked. "Is that supposed to be an apology?" She exhaled, looking down. "It's the truth." Something bitter twisted in my chest. For years I had begged for this, for her to see me, to acknowledge what she had done. And now, when I finally had it, I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. "You had a choice," I said, voice steady, "and you chose him, every time." She didn't argue. Instead, she reached across the table, gripping my wrist. Her fingers were cold. "If you go through with this," she whispered, "he won't just fight back, he'll destroy you." I held her gaze. Then, slowly, I pulled my hand away. Let him try. That night, I sat in my apartment, the weight of the day pressing against my shoulders. Xavier was on the phone, pacing. "Sarah, this is getting dangerous. If Victor retaliates—" "I know," I interrupted. "I'm ready." Isolde sat nearby, typing furiously on her laptop. She had spent the last few days searching for apartments, applying for jobs, building the life she had never been allowed to have. She looked up, giving me a small, determined nod. "I'm not going back." Pride swelled in my chest. She was finally standing on her own. Then, my phone buzzed. A private message. You should have listened to your mother. My stomach clenched. I moved toward the window, peering down at the street below. A black car was parked outside. The engine was running. A figure in a suit stepped out, walking toward the entrance. I took a slow breath, my pulse steadying. Here we go. A knock on the door echoed through the apartment. Miss Delacroix, we need to talk. I stared at the door, my pulse steady despite the unease settling in my gut. Midnight. No one should be here at this hour unless they had something urgent or dangerous to say. Isolde sat up from the couch, eyes wide. Syrah, should we call someone? I shook my head. Number, I'll handle it. Slowly, I stepped toward the door and pulled it open. Two men in suits stood there, their expressions neutral but calculated. I recognized them immediately, Victor's top lawyers. Miss Delacroix, the taller one said smoothly, adjusting his tie. We were hoping for a moment of your time. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You've got one. He exchanged a glance with his colleague before speaking. You've made quite a mess, haven't you? The federal investigation, the media storm, the public spectacle of it all. Your father wishes to resolve this quietly before it escalates further. I scoffed. It's already escalated. That was his doing, not mine. The shorter man cleared his throat. Be that as it may, you still have a choice. Withdraw your cooperation with the feds, drop any further public statements, and walk away. Do that, and Victor Delacroix is willing to ensure you walk away financially stable. Refuse, and he will spare no expense in making sure you're buried beneath lawsuits and legal fees until you have nothing left. A threat. I let the words settle between us for a moment before responding. Tell my father I'm not afraid of him, I said calmly. And I won't be bullied into silence. The taller man sighed, as if I'd disappointed him. That's unfortunate. You could have made this easier on yourself. They turned and walked down the hall without another word. I shut the door, exhaling. That was expected, I muttered. Isolde bit her lip. Syrah, are you sure? Another knock. This time it was slower, heavier. I turned to the door again, but I already knew. I opened it. Victor stood there, smirking. Did you really think I'd let this end without seeing you one last time? Victor walked into my apartment like he still owned it. Isolde tensed behind me, but I didn't move. Don't bother sitting down, I said coolly. This won't take long. He chuckled, shaking his head. You always did have a dramatic streak, just like your mother. I clenched my jaw. What do you want? Victor took a slow step forward, eyes dark. I want you to stop this childish rebellion before you do something you regret. I laughed. Actually laughed. Regret? I think you're the one with regrets, Victor. His smirk faltered. You're making a mistake, Syrah. You're nothing without me. Without this family. I stepped closer, meeting his gaze. That's where you're wrong. I was nothing with this family. His jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists. For years, I had been afraid of that look. Not anymore. Look at you, I murmured. You're angry, but not just at me. You're afraid, aren't you? Because for the first time in your life, you're losing. Victor's nostrils flared. I've never lost a battle in my life. Then you're about to experience your first, I shot back. Silence stretched between us. Then, behind me, Isolde spoke. Is this who you really are? Victor turned, surprised by the small, trembling voice behind me. Isolde's expression wasn't angry. It was devastated. You always told me Syrah was the problem, she whispered. You made me believe she was the reason our family was broken. But it was you. It was always you. Victor's mask of control cracked. Isolde, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, she interrupted. You never loved us. You only loved control. A flicker of something crossed his face. Shock, maybe even hurt. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold fury. He turned back to me. Drop this fight, Syrah, he ordered. You can still walk away. I tilted my head. What happens if I don't? His voice dropped into something almost inhuman. Then I will destroy you. The room felt suffocating, heavy with the weight of everything unspoken between us. I held my ground. Go ahead, I said. Try me. Victor's fists clenched, his lips parting slightly, as if he were about to say something else. One final attempt to regain control. Then, for the first time in his life, he said nothing. Instead, he turned on his heel and stormed out the door. I followed him out onto the apartment hallway, watching as he disappeared down the stairs. But before stepping into the waiting black car, he turned back one last time. His voice was quiet, but laced with venom. Enjoy your little victory, Sarah. It won't last. I didn't respond. I simply watched as the car disappeared into the night. I watched the taillights of Victor's car disappear into the city, my breath steady, my mind sharper than ever. We'll see about that, I whispered. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the city below. Isolde sat on the couch, her hands clasped together tightly. Neither of us spoke for a moment. It felt like the end. But I knew better. I was right. My phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. At first, I thought it was another empty threat from Victor, another meaningless attempt at intimidation. But when I saw the notification, my stomach dropped. Breaking news. Business mogul Serafina Delacroix, accused of financial fraud. I stared at the headline, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. What is it? Isolde asked, pushing off the couch. I turned the screen toward her. She gasped. No, she whispered. Not again. Victor had made his move. He wasn't just retaliating, he was trying to erase me. I threw on a coat and stormed out the door, Isolde right behind me. We rushed into a cab, heading straight to Lucas Moreau's office. He's desperate, I muttered. This is all he has left. Then why does it feel like he still has control? Isolde murmured. He doesn't. I clenched my fists. Not anymore. Lucas Moreau opened the door before I could even knock. His office was dimly lit, his desk covered in scattered notes and open files. He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. Sarah? He said. What's going on? I dropped my phone on his desk, the news article still glowing on the screen. We're taking him down, I said. Lucas's fingers flew over the keyboard as he pulled up files, emails, documents. This isn't just financial fraud, he muttered. Your father! He's been hiding money offshore, funneling it through shell companies. If this gets out... It will, I cut in. Isolde sat beside me, pale but focused. What happens next? She asked. Lucas exhaled. We send it to the authorities, to the press. But once we do this, there's no going back. I didn't hesitate. Send it. Lucas hit a key, and just like that, the truth was unleashed. The first news alert came minutes later. Victor Delacroix, under federal investigation for fraud and money laundering. I exhaled, a tightness in my chest finally loosening. Goodbye, Victor, I murmured. Victor sat in his office, the television blaring behind him. His hands curled into fists as the headline flashed across the screen. No, he muttered. This isn't happening. Phones rang off the hook. His lawyers scrambled, his empire cracking beneath the weight of the truth. But there was no escaping this. When the police arrived, the cameras were already waiting. They escorted him outside, handcuffs glinting in the light. Reporters shouted questions. Flashbulbs exploded. And then, as they shoved him into the back of the police car, Victor turned to the cameras, his expression eerily calm. This isn't the end, he said. You'll see. The television flickered in the dimly lit apartment, casting sharp shadows along the walls. News anchors spoke in measured, serious tones, their voices a dull hum in the background. Every major network was covering the collapse of the Delacroix empire. Victor's arrest, the lawsuits, the financial ruin. It was all public now, displayed in headlines across the country. I sat on the couch, my body heavy with exhaustion, yet strangely light. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. The weight of my father's influence, his manipulation, his threats, they were gone. But the silence felt different than I expected. It wasn't peace, not yet. Across from me, Isolde stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. She had been quiet ever since we watched Victor being led into the police car. Even now, as his empire burned, she looked lost. She had fought so hard to break free, but in the end, we had still lost something. "Are you okay?" I asked. She blinked as if waking from a trance, then exhaled softly. "I don't know," she admitted. "It's over, but he's still our father. No matter what he did, I can't just turn it off." I nodded. I understood that feeling all too well. Neither of us spoke after that. The TV droned on, listing the names of people who had once stood beside Victor, but were now turning against him to save themselves. Then, a sharp knock at the door broke the silence. Isolde flinched, then shot me a nervous glance. I rose to my feet and approached the door cautiously. My body still hadn't adjusted to the idea that Victor wasn't lurking in the background, waiting for his next move. I opened the door. No one was there, only an envelope resting on the floor. I picked it up, recognizing the handwriting instantly. "Althea." I turned to Isolde, holding it up. Her face paled. "Should we even open it?" she asked quietly. I studied the envelope for a long moment, then sighed. Only one way to find out. We sat at the kitchen table, the letter unfolded between us. Isolde took a deep breath and began to read. It wasn't an apology, not really. Althea wrote about her regrets, but not about what she had done, only about what she had lost. She claimed she had known, deep down, that Victor would fall eventually, that his power was built on secrets and lies, and nothing like that could last forever. But she also wrote about fear, how she had stayed because it was easier, because Victor had made sure she felt there was no escape. And then, the final warning. Power doesn't just disappear. Someone will take his place. I clenched my jaw, gripping the edge of the table. Isolde set the letter down, her expression clouded. "I don't know what to think." "Don't," I said. "It doesn't matter." "But..." I stood abruptly, taking the letter in my hands. I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and let the flame lick at the edges of the paper. It curled, darkening, turning to ash before floating into the embers below. Isolde watched, wide-eyed. "She made her choice," I said firmly. "Now we make ours." She hesitated, then nodded. A month passed. The Delacroix name no longer carried the power it once did. Investors fled, companies distanced themselves, and the empire my father had built was gone. Isolde found a job, her first real one, where no one knew her last name. She was learning to live a life without influence, without privilege. It wasn't easy, but she was doing it. And for the first time in years, I had choices of my own. A career opportunity, one that had nothing to do with the Delacroix legacy. We were finally free. Or at least, we thought we were. As we sat in a small cafe, sipping coffee, a television above the counter flickered with breaking news. A new name had surfaced, an unfamiliar figure stepping into the space Victor had left behind. A new power rising from the ashes. I exhaled, shaking my head as I turned to Isolde. "Think we'll ever be done with this family?" She smirked, stirring her coffee. "Do we ever get to be?" The air was crisp and cool, the kind of evening that made New York City feel almost magical. From the rooftop cafe, the skyline stretched endlessly, golden lights flickering like distant stars. It was the first time in years that I truly took the time to appreciate it. Isolde sat across from me, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. There was something different about her now, lighter, freer. "Probably not," she said with a soft smile, shaking her head. "But at least this time, we're ready." I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. The weight of everything we had endured was still there, but it no longer suffocated me. We sat in silence for a few moments, watching the city move below us. I still think about them, Isolde admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, waiting. Even after everything, she continued, part of me wonders if they ever truly loved us, or if we were just investments. The pain in her voice made my chest tighten. They were never capable of loving us the way we needed, I said. That's their failure, not ours. She nodded, but I could tell she was still processing it all. And that was okay. Healing wasn't a straight line. For the first time in a long time, there was no tension between us. No resentment, no doubt. Just quiet understanding. Then, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the caller ID and raised an eyebrow. Well, this is unexpected. Isolde leaned forward. Who is it? The office was sleek, modern, far removed from the cold grandeur of the Delacroix estate. It was the kind of place where real power was built, not just inherited. We sat across from a woman in a crisp suit, her sharp eyes studying us carefully. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. You two have made quite the impression, she said, tapping a neatly stacked file on her desk. People have been watching. Should we be concerned about that? I asked. She smirked. Not in the way you think. You took down one of the most powerful men in New York. That kind of thing doesn't go unnoticed. I exchanged a glance with Isolde. The woman continued. We believe your talents could be useful. Both of you. She slid 2 envelopes across the table. Inside, you'll find 2 very different opportunities. One for you, Sarah, and one for Isolde. Neither has anything to do with your family's name. No shadows, no legacy. Just a chance to build something of your own. I opened mine, scanning the details. It was real. A job offer. A powerful one. Not a handout, not a sympathy gesture. A real opportunity. I looked over at Isolde, whose hands trembled slightly as she held her own envelope. For the first time, we had choices. So, I said, tapping my fingers against the table, thinking, what do we say, Izzy? She met my gaze, and for the first time in a long time, she grinned. I think it's time we take control of our own future. A month later, the city bustled around us as we walked side by side down a busy street. Neither of us looked back. There was nothing left for us in the past. A TV screen in a store window played a news clip. Victor Delacroix's legal battle was still ongoing. His influence was fading, his name slowly being erased from the industry he once ruled. We had won. But as we passed, I caught something in the reflection of the glass. A figure standing across the street, watching us. I turned my head slightly, but by the time I focused, they were gone. Maybe Althea was right. Power didn't just disappear. Someone would take Victor's place. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I turned to Isolde, smiling. No matter what comes next, we're ready. Life isn't about the legacy you're born into. It's about the one you choose to create. I fought to reclaim my voice, to break free from the chains of expectations, and to define my own worth. Strength isn't about winning every battle. It's about standing your ground when the world tells you to kneel. We all have the power to rewrite our own stories, to rise, to heal, to build something greater than what was given to us. And if you believe in choosing your own path, in finding your own strength, then this journey is for you. Subscribe, and let's walk this path together.